The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. This is Sunday, the 14th of September, 2025. And Mary, what a sad, sad week. I mean, tragic.
Yeah, there was good news this week, but there was the terrible, tragic news that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was giving a talk at Utah University, and his motto, Polly, was "Prove me wrong." Here was somebody, a young person, trying to engage young people in civil discourse, in talking about real issues that affect their lives. And he was tragically assassinated. He was a big supporter of our work at CHD. I was recently on his podcast, and we were talking about having him come and be at our conference. So it's a huge blow. It's terrifying to all of us that people, for saying things that some people find controversial, can be shot. It's absolutely criminal. And it is remarkable, Polly, that his murderer is alive. And I'm hopeful that we'll find out a lot more about who is really behind this and what their motives really were. But it's tragic. He leaves behind a wife and 2 young children, and it's just, it's awful, abominable.
Awful and deeply affecting our viewers, the staff at CHD, all around the world, seeing that people are deeply affected by it. So,
Yeah, he was also a great friend to Bobby Kennedy. He had Bobby on many times on his podcast, and Bobby's put out a post on it, as has the president. His death is deeply affecting. He was a charismatic, young man.
Right, well, let's get on with the news this week, everybody. Brenda Belletti in The Defender. HHS will link autism to Tylenol use during pregnancy, the Wall Street Journal reports. US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. plans to announce that autism is linked to the use of Tylenol during pregnancy in a report expected to be released this month. Shares of Tylenol declined nearly 11% following this news. So I think people are getting a bit confused. No one is saying that Tylenol is the cause of autism solely, but I don't think it helps, right?
Right. This is a leak. We don't know if this is accurate, Polly, but there is significant evidence that shows that acetaminophen, which is the ingredient in Tylenol, is toxic to the liver. And when you give this to a mom, for her fetus, or you give it, more importantly, probably to just day-old babies, you're not allowing their bodies to detoxify this acetaminophen, and it can end up causing brain damage. I think we are going to find there's apparently quite a bit of studying that's been done in the last few years. Our Chief Science Officer, Brian Hooker, says that he thinks that the most risky time for Tylenol is neonatal, very young infants. And there are a lot of proposals among the ones submitted to HHS on autism causation based on Tylenol. But no one's saying, Polly, that it's the primary cause of autism or the only one. Absolutely, that's not the case.
It's really interesting because we were all told to give Tylenol, or Calpol, it's called in England, before you vaccinate and afterwards. And I remember giving it to my child thinking, why am I giving her this? She's not even ill.
Right. So that's a big part of it, Polly, is that most parents were told, oh, give your baby Tylenol before they get their shots, give Tylenol after the shots. It will reduce fever, it will reduce any aches and pains. And so it really may be a very important cofactor, but it's probably not the only one. I certainly do believe that the driving cause has been vaccines and the ingredients in them, aluminum in particular, mercury, polysorbate 80, and Tylenol just adds to the carnage.
MAHA Commission outlines sweeping agenda to target chronic disease. A 20-page report by the Make America Healthy Again Commission listed 128 recommendations for improving public health. The recommendations included conducting studies on vaccine injuries and the root cause of autism, and restructuring the federal government's response to the childhood chronic disease crisis.
This was the report that was predicted, it was required by President Trump's executive order back at the beginning of the year. And this follows on the diagnostic report from April. This one was short, it was 20 pages versus the 73 pages before. And it basically said what the first report did, candidly, Polly. It basically talked about poor diet, lack of exercise, stress, over medicalization as causing the chronic disease epidemic. And it's really about putting gold standard science first. I love what our colleague at the Global Wellness Forum, Sayer G, said. He said, it challenges the sacred cows in science, medicine, and nutrition, and it cracks open doors locked for decades. I think that's exactly right. It looks at a lot of things. There are critics of it that it didn't go far enough, especially on pesticides. But Polly, the way I see this is just sort of checking the box. They needed to put this out there. It's a strategy report. It's not everything they're going to do. One of the important things that this report also does is it suggests, and we'll talk more about it later in the show, how they're going to limit direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising, which is a big deal, and limit also some of the food commercials that go to kids that are just beyond ridiculous.
Charles Like News in the Defender here. The data proves that Fauci misled Trump on COVID vaccine efficacy in 2020. Data from randomized controlled trials proved that COVID-19 vaccines failed to reach clinically significant efficacy against infection with SARS-CoV-2. Furthermore, evidence suggests that in 2020, public health officials who failed to fully disclose the very low absolute efficacy of the vaccines misled President Donald Trump about the efficacy of the vaccines.
So this is very important. This is an article by a scientist, Ron Brown, who back in February 2021 came out with an article saying you're only talking about the reduction in relative risk. Pfizer said 95%, effective. But in fact, even in February 2021, Polly, 3 months after these vaccines rolled out, Ron Brown was saying, no, the absolute risk reduction is under 1%. In other words, these vaccines are going to do nothing for the vast majority of people, 99% of people, to reduce the infection or the spread of disease. And it's very interesting. This article notes that in 2011, so more than 10 years before, the FDA said you always have to disclose both relative risk and absolute risk, which they didn't do. So this is interesting, especially, Polly, in light of President Trump's post a week or so ago saying, Pfizer, you better come out and justify your success. This is showing us that he really was misled. And I think that may be important to him as he moves further along the trajectory to say, Pfizer, you lied not only to me, you lied to the American people, and people died.
How about Deborah Burke? Wasn't Deborah Burke the liar?
All of them did. Ashish Jha, Deborah Burks, the people who didn't lie, Peter Navarro, Scott Atlas, they basically were sidelined as soon as the new administration came in. No, the COVID task force had a lot of liars in it.
No, really. Michael Nevadakis in the Defender. Fauci told colleagues to delete COVID-related communications, emails show. The email, which may violate federal law, contradicts Dr. Anthony Fauci's congressional testimony last year when he repeatedly denied deleting official records of public documents. Senator Ron Paul called on Fauci to testify before Congress.
Super important, Polly. This is really exciting. So this is Senator Rand Paul, who chairs the Senate Homeland Security and Government Oversight Committee, saying, I believe that Dr. Fauci perjured himself before the Congress. I believe we have hard evidence now that he lied. He told us in the Senate that he never destroyed federal documents, but all the emails you write when you're in that job that relate to your work are federal documents. And in his own emails, he was telling the head of NIH, Francis Collins, read this and destroy the email, obviously trying to hide it. And so there's a letter that Rand Paul put up on his Twitter feed saying not only that there's evidence that he destroyed emails and was instructing others to destroy emails, but that he is now being required to save and produce all these documents to Senator Paul by September 23rd. And Senator Paul has requested that Tony Fauci be available on 4 different dates between October and early December. So we should be seeing Tony Fauci being hauled into the Senate for an interrogation. He does have a pardon, a federal pardon that goes back to 2014, really extraordinary, a retroactive pardon. But he's not free from being brought before the Senate and required to testify. He's also not free of potential state litigation. So we're getting closer to the truth here. Paul Thacker, a writer that we admire on Substack, the Disinformation Chronicle, says only the most deranged Fauci fan can defend this. So we're moving in here to get closer to the truth, Polly, and closer to accountability.
Good. Let's hope he doesn't have a memory problem this time. Remember last time?
He's going to say 100. He's going to say 200 times. I don't remember. That's what he's going to say.
In the Defender, total sham vaccine injury lawyer destroys doctors' claims that hundreds of placebo-controlled trials showed childhood vaccines are safe. During a US Senate hearing on Tuesday, vaccine supporter Dr. Jake Scott touted his database of hundreds of placebo-controlled vaccine trials that he claimed show childhood vaccines are safe. Attorney Aaron Siri refuted this claim and showing that none of the trials used a true placebo for testing a vaccine on the CDC's immunization schedule.
Polly, I was in this hearing room and it was pretty dramatic. This fellow, Dr. Jake Scott, who is associated at Stanford, he's apparently an associate professor and a clinician, a doctor, was just so outmatched. And so he is sort of, his claim to fame is he's put together this database of all of these studies showing that they do use placebos for vaccines. And it was really extraordinary. So Aaron Siri walked through, I think before he testified, that the database is a total sham, that 565 of the studies aren't related to the childhood schedule. Of the 94 remaining, 74 don't involve healthy children. Of the 24 remaining, 21 don't use inert placebos, which left 3 studies, and none of those used real placebos. So this guy, Jake Scott, was trying to create this database to discredit Bobby Kennedy's claim that there are no true randomized controlled inert placebo controlled trials, clinical trials for the childhood schedule. So what happened in that hearing room totally confirmed what Secretary Kennedy had said. It totally discredited this Dr. Scott. And then Polly, it dumbfounded us in the audience. He then acknowledged that he hadn't really studied his 661 studies. So it was extraordinary. And shortly after this hearing, Polly, he took down all of his posts from social media because Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio kept reading Dr. Scott's posts and then asking him what his views were now. And on a couple of them, to his credit, he acknowledged that he had changed his position. But anyway, it was really obvious, Polly, that if this is the best that the pharmaceutical industry can do to uphold its claims that the childhood schedule is safe and effective, they are in very deep trouble right now.
Suzanne Burdick, authors of astonishing study showing unvaccinated kids are healthier, refused to go public with results. During a US Senate hearing on how the corruption of science has affected public opinion and vaccine policy, Attorney Aaron Siri revealed a long-hidden study on vaccinated versus unvaccinated children and testified about the origins of the study and why its findings were suppressed.
So, Polly, in fact, this isn't such an astonishing study to us. We have been looking at vax-unvax comparisons for a long time, and Bobby Kennedy and Brian Hooker put out a book, Vax-Unvax, Let the Science Speak. There aren't a lot of really good high quality studies of vax unvax, but there are, close to 10. And we looked at all of the ones available. They looked at them. And it's very clear, Polly, it's very clear that no matter what disorder you look at, allergies, asthma, ADHD, autism, diabetes, and beyond, that unvaccinated children with uninterrupted development of their immune systems are healthier. So this was a study, though, of 18,000 children that Del Bigtree and Aaron Siri commissioned, essentially, or worked with a doctor, a mainstream doctor at the Henry Ford Clinic in Detroit, Michigan, to do. And Dr. Zervos, who led the team, said, yes, we will absolutely publish whatever results we find. And so they had 16,500 vaccinated children. They had 2,000 unvaccinated children, enough to be statistically significant. And what they found is what you and I would have expected, not what Dr. Zervos expected, which is that the unvaccinated kids are a lot healthier. Vaccinated children are 2.5 times more likely to have some kind of a chronic condition, almost 4.5 times more likely to have asthma, almost 6 times more likely to have an autoimmune disorder, almost 6 times more likely to have a neurodevelopmental disorder. So this was something that they started on in 2017, and it turned out that the people at the hospital would not publish it, and the doctors didn't want to publish because they thought they would lose their jobs, which is probably the case. I think that's not the case now because Senator Johnson is pushing for it. But this is extraordinary that this is the data that's found and it's hidden. It does speak absolutely to the corruption of science. It's not science if you can't publish your results.
But it's the same that Brian Hooker and Bobby found in.
It's very consistent with what the data is. So there's the Mawson studies, there's Brian Hooker and Mr. Miller study, Neil Miller
study.
There's the People study. Absolutely, there's the People study. There's Goodman and Gallagher. There are really good peer-reviewed studies, and this one is not yet peer-reviewed, but hopefully it will be. This is just adding to the urgency, Polly, that HHS really look at this data. Unvaccinated children are healthier, full stop. And so I'm hopeful that this is going to continue to get a lot of attention.
Michael Nevadakis, is it safe to get 3 vaccines at once? Vaccine makers say yes, but FDA wants proof. According to an August 25th memo, the FDA now says vaccine makers must conduct clinical trials to study the potential adverse effects of simultaneously giving multiple shots for respiratory viruses before they can market the vaccines as safe and effective when they're received at the same time. This is great. This is a long time coming.
Yeah, a long time coming. They keep lying about the safety of co-administration where there's no science to support that. We are supportive of a lawsuit that's been brought by attorney Rick Jaffe on behalf of Paul Thomas and Ken Stoller and Stand for Health Freedom that says there's no science behind the CDC schedule. We completely support that. It's very dangerous. And one of the things that's exciting, Polly, is on September 18, the newly formed Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is meeting, and they're going to be re-evaluating the hepatitis B vaccine at birth recommendation, the RSV recommendation for young babies, and potentially other ones.
RSV, well, here we go. Brenda Belletti, nearly 200 safety signals associated with RSV shots. This is post-marketing analysis showing this. A peer-reviewed analysis of data in the vaccine adverse event reporting system found nearly 200 safety signals associated with RSV vaccines currently marketed to older adults and pregnant women. Researchers identified neurological disorders, blood disorders, serious complications for pregnant women and their infants. I mean, how long have we been saying this? Do not put vaccines in the unborn or any, as far as I'm concerned, anything, but pregnant women.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, Polly. So the good thing about this study by scientists in the United Kingdom and France is that they looked at all of the adverse events reported to VAERS for the Pfizer, Glaxo, and Moderna monoclonal antibody shots is what the RSV shot is. And they found neurological disorders, blood disorders, other kinds of complications. And I am hopeful, Polly, that they're going to pull this. That they're going to pull the recommendation on September 18th. We'll see. 200 safety signals. Come on. And this has just been we've been covering this very well, Polly. This has only been recommended and on the market for under 2 years. And in fact, I think it was Robert Malone on ACIP said that he had received information that he now considers to be misleading. There were 2 votes against RSV earlier, and I have a feeling that others are now going to get on board and say, yeah, we made a mistake. This should not be recommended.
Well, in the Defender, in Children's Health Watch section, it says here, FDA chief details intense investigation into alleged child deaths from COVID-19 shots. This is Endpoint News reporting. The US FDA chief Marty Makary said the agency is investigating whether the COVID-19 vaccines caused any deaths in kids. Makary described the probe as an intense investigation. The agency is following up with parents of children who claim to have had their children killed and reviewing the autopsy reports and asking doctors to review the data. I am so pleased to see this. This is a bit, again, like what we did on the bus. They are listening to the parents for the first time.
First time, and they're actually going back to the doctors, Polly. They're looking at the autopsy. They're doing what they should do with every single report to VAERS that they don't do typically. So apparently there are 202 reported child deaths in VAERS, probably vastly undercounted for actual ones, maybe even what was actually reported to VAERS. But they're now researching this. And again, I'm pretty confident that they're going to come back and say, there's absolutely no justification. And these children did die from COVID shots, which then takes us, Polly, to the whole, dark hole of the countermeasures injury compensation program, which is a total fiasco. So, but anyway, again, good start. They're on the right track. You've got to actually evaluate vaccine injuries when you look at the safety and effectiveness of anything.
Brenda Belletti here in the Defender. New look at old data shows COVID vaccine dangers hiding in plain sight. Scientists from Children's Health Defense and the Brownson Institute reanalyzed data used in earlier studies that concluded the COVID-19 vaccines were safe. By comparing relative risks from different vaccines, which the original studies failed to do, the new research revealed evidence linking the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccine to significant health dangers and suggesting some earlier studies were biased by design. And in fact, we at CHDTV did have Carl Jablowski on talking about that in depth.
Yeah, this was essentially, Polly, a fraudulent study of 46 million adults in in England, and it was published in Nature Communications, very prestigious journal, basically suggesting that, there's no heart issues, there's no cardiac issues with AstraZeneca. But Brian Hooker, Carl Jablonowski, and Clayton Baker, by really analyzing the relative risk of these different vaccines, the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the Moderna, they found that the AstraZeneca is super dangerous. And in fact, in court, AstraZeneca in 2024 admitted that it caused thrombotic thrombocytopenia, very serious blood disorder, and they then took it off the market, very likely due to what happened in court. And apparently, according to this study that our scientists did, in 9 of 13 categories, the AstraZeneca vaccine against COVID was worse than the others. So this is just an example of these fatal flaws in the way medical research is permitted to go forward that is under the radar. We've got to change that too. They just publish lies.
And then we've got an explosion of rare blood cancers in England following AstraZeneca, including my mother. It's just, it's barbaric what they've done. But anyway, Brenda Belletti, 11-week-old Anna died hours after her routine vaccines. Nearly 12 years later, a court ruled the vaccines killed her. The family of Anna Sims is the first in more than a decade to receive compensation from the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program following the death of a baby after routine immunization. The ruling could serve as a model for future infant death cases in vaccine court, according to a working group of researchers and advocates. How sad, an 11-week-old baby. I mean, it's just disgusting. There's countless of those, Mary.
This baby died in 2013, Polly. This is a case of the baby died 6 hours after her vaccination. And I just want to tell you, what did she get? She got Pediarix, Hib, pneumococcal 13 rototech. You know what? You add that up, that's 20 vaccines. This 2-month-old baby got 20 vaccines at once, and 6 hours later, she died. And in this injury compensation program, the Department of Justice and HHS, up until now, have fought for over 10 years to deny this family's claim that the baby died from her vaccines, which is insane. She finally got, the family got some compensation, trivial, really. It's just to prove the point. They got it by arguing that she did not die from sudden infant death syndrome. She died from vaccine-induced brain injury. She had a classic case of encephalitis, i.e., brain inflammation, after receiving 20 vaccines whose purpose is to cause inflammation. And so what's exciting about this, Polly, is this is going to set a precedent now in the injury compensation program. And I'm looking towards major revision of the injury compensation program under HHS Secretary Kennedy. But now it should be possible for families to get compensation when their baby dies right after vaccination, 6 hours after. And the DOJ and HHS were trying to argue that somehow it wasn't classic symptoms of encephalitis. I mean, it makes my blood boil, frankly.
22 state attorney generals urge U.S. Supreme Court to uphold religious exemptions in Amish schools. They submitted briefs in support of the Amish parents and schools who appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court after lower courts rejected their lawsuit, challenging New York's ban on religious exemptions to vaccination mandates. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of the plaintiffs, it would be an absolute game changer for religious exemptions, says Greg Glazer.
Polly, this is super exciting. So this is a case that's brought up from the Western District of New York to the Second Circuit, where they say there's no constitutional violation here, nothing to see here, case dismissed. And these are two amicus briefs, one by the Alabama Attorney General on behalf of 21 other states, one from the Florida's Attorney General. So the Alabama one on behalf of 21 states says you cannot have a law that specifically discriminates against people of faith, people of religious persuasions. And basically this religious exemption bar, they argue, burdens only religiously motivated conduct, and it interferes with religious education and upbringing. The Florida Attorney General's amicus brief suggests that 44 states and the District of Columbia all successfully balance public health while permitting religious exemptions. The Amish plaintiffs say that, so what happened in this case is the Amish schools that do not vaccinate the children were fined tens of thousands of dollars for not having these kids be vaccinated. And the schools have said, we do not, cannot, and will not comply because it violates their religion. And what's really exciting is after the time that this panel of the Second Circuit met and said that, the case is without merit in March of 2025, in June of 2025, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Mahmoud versus Taylor, that the courts now on things related to religious upbringing of children, they have to use a very high standard in evaluating those claims. They have to use something called strict scrutiny. The state has to prove that they use the least restrictive means possible to infringe on these religious or other fundamental rights. Up until now, the Second Circuit in this Western District of New York were able to apply something called rational basis, which means the government has any reason at all. They get a pass. It's okay. This case, because there are 22 AGs on this from the states, it is going to be really hard for the Supreme Court not to take this case. And given a standard of strict scrutiny, it's going to be really hard for the Supreme Court not to side with the Amish plaintiffs here, which would disallow any restrictions on religious exemptions going forward. California, New York, Maine, Connecticut, it won't matter. So this is a really important case. Kudos to Aaron Siri for bringing this. I think that the timing is just right after this new precedent from the Supreme Court. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
At a preliminary stage, the Supreme Court has not yet taken this case. But once the Supreme Court takes this case, it would probably be argued this year, and we would probably get a decision in June of 2026.
Okay. Michael Nevadakis, a form of bribery, FDA and HHS crack down on misleading drug ads. Pharmaceutical companies will be required to provide full safety disclosures in direct-to-consumer advertisements of their products, according to a policy HHS and the FDA announced on Tuesday. We will shut down the pipeline of deception by drug companies, says US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeah, there's a big step. There's no question that the direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertisers has bought big media. They will not criticize the industry. They will not cover the news. This is going to make it much more expensive for pharma to advertise. It will make them stay awake at night wondering if they've given full disclosure. It will have a dramatic impact to reduce these pharmaceutical ads on TV, I hope and pray. So it's exciting.
Glyphosate found in eggs and chickens sold in grocery stores traced to GMO poultry feed. So scientific review in World's Poultry Science Journal highlights the health risks of glyphosate throughout the process of the poultry production. Residues from the widely used weed killer ingredient are found in animal feed, soil and water on livestock farms and can accumulate and magnify throughout the food chain. So basically saying our food is tainted. You've got to buy organic, people. You've got to.
You're right, Polly. And it's saying conventional eggs have glyphosate in them. Glyphosate will just ruin different parts of your body, particularly your gut. So, yeah, it's crazy.
And you've got to be careful about eating it. I can't remember the last time I've eaten out. But just because I don't want to. I don't want to eat that food. You've got to find an organic restaurant.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's really expensive. Suzanne Burdick, AAP hasn't updated advice on cell phone radiation in nearly a decade. AT&T listed among funders of the AAP, so that's the American Academy of Pediatrics, has not updated its parental guidance on cell phone radiation in nearly a decade, despite numerous studies in recent years highlighting the dangers of exposure in children. A link on the group's parenting advice website lists telecommunication company AT&T as one of its corporate sponsors. That's why you've got to listen to our EMR department at Children's Health Defense. We've got the latest science.
Yeah, no, we do. AT&T bought American Academy of Pediatrics. Their other sponsors are Sanofi, Genentech, Regeneron, Vicks. How can the AAP possibly be unbiased when it's talking about products of their sponsors? It's not. Fortunately, AAP is supporting that the Federal Communications Commission review the health guidelines, that we won a judgment on that, Children's Health Defense and Environmental Health Trust in 2021, but that hasn't happened yet. So AAP is not a good source of advice. We do have robust information on our website about electromagnetic radiation.
Okay, I love this. This is in the Defender. Where were you, senators, while they dripped poison into our children's bodies? Paul Connett, PhD, co-author of The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It There, responds to Thursday's US Senate hearing, during which members of the Finance Committee accuse US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. of politicizing science.
So this relates to last month's hearing, the Senate Finance Committee, where the senators really were just hurling insults at Secretary Kennedy and accusing him of being anti-science and so on. And I love this because Paul Connett has been an advocate to get fluoride out. And so he's looked at that and he says, where were you when they were doing this for 80 years? Bobby Kennedy was actually following the science. He was actually calling for getting fluoride out. He knows this. Where have you been when we're injecting aluminum and mercury and exposing children to fluoride? And he ends by saying, should we be messing with mRNA? Do we know what we're doing? It's very powerful. It's short. It's very powerful that, unfortunately, our leadership on these issues has been abysmal.
Yes, but we can't help but get the feeling things are happening. So when Bobby first came in as HHS secretary, it was a little slow for all us. We all, I don't know, thought things would happen like that, which is ridiculous. 7 months in or 8 months in, really starting to see the
No,
benefits
Paul.
of that work.
And yes, we're starting to see real changes, like Makari at FDA talking about infant deaths, and they're coming out and saying we're going to stop direct consumer advertising in the way that it's happened, and they've changed the looking at the childhood schedule. There's a lot that's going to be happening on that, and making clear over medicalization, bad food, pesticides, stress, lack of exercise, those are the things that are really fueling the chronic disease epidemic. All of those things are really, really changing. And what we saw both this past hearing, but the one before where Bobby Kennedy was being grilled, the pushback is really strong, Polly. It's really strong. And so we're in a tough spot. We all need to be, all of us who care about making children healthy again, making America healthy again, we have got to be supporting what Kennedy is doing right now. It's a very treacherous time. They made very clear in this leaked memo we've talked about that they're trying to get Kennedy out of his job by the end of September. So it's a very, very difficult time right now, and we need to be supporting our champions in the government.
We absolutely do. So we've got to continue to pray big, pray over Bobby, pray big, everyone. Never settle, stand firm. We're going to go to our geoengineering report now and then our story of the day. And I will see you tomorrow on Good Morning CHD-TV with another 1 hour special with Dr. Suzanne Humphreys taking your live questions. So that'll be happening tomorrow.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. The Federal Aviation Authority, NASA, NOAA claim that they're now studying contrails. I guess that means condensed air trails. In a new document, they're calling Contrails Research Roadmap, and we see it here on the screen. Clayton, you just put out a tweet about this, basically suggesting that this is a kind of this was all been a psyop, and that, no, the psyop is over. So, Dane, is this really about the science, this research about contrails, or is this, in your view, a cover-up for large-scale geoengineering that's already been happening? And what's your deeper read on this as someone who's been studying weather modification for many years?
Clayton's exactly correct. This is nothing but more cover-up on an ever larger scale. And let's all keep pretending that this is, quote, condensation in our skies when we have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. And the narrative of, quote, contrail is breaking down very rapidly. People are realizing that's not condensation in our skies. That's what brought me into this fight, was losing 60, 70, 80% of my solar power uptake on my off-grid home. And that's my background with Bechtel Power, again, part of that in the renewable energy industry. I knew that couldn't be just, quote, condensation. And back to the aluminum that Clayton so correctly outlined. When we have aluminum in our precipitation, that's what caused me to start testing my precipitation from an initial rain test of 7 parts per billion, which was already high for aluminum, given my filtered forested location, no industry around me, nothing from between me and Japan, given the prevailing winds, and subsequent rain tests over the next 18 months, escalating to 3,450 parts per billion of aluminum. That's extraordinarily high. That's toxic rain, period. It's killing root systems, killing soil microbiome. As Clayton said, it's toxic to all life forms, period, no exceptions. And for those that try to claim that it's normal to have aluminum in our precipitation, this is freeform aluminum. Freeform aluminum, whether it's blowing dirt, sand, or whatever people want to try to blame this on, freeform aluminum doesn't exist naturally in the environment. It has to be mined, refined, and dispersed to be in freeform. So again, this matches climate engineering patterns exactly with all the detrimental effects Clayton outlined. And now we have a changing atmospheric chemistry, and with the wet bulb temperatures that we are seeing underreported, just like this, quote, condensation trail narrative, absolute, blatant, glaring lie of cover-up from every single administration, doesn't matter their political stripe. And they're masking the true severity of the heat index readings as well, Mary. We know that. We're checking surface ambient temperatures and humidities. They are lying about everything across the board. And that's getting worse by the day.
Clayton, is there anything you want to add about that?
The one thing I would say is that I think that, having sort of cut my teeth in the COVID era, as a physician who kind of hopefully saw through some of the lies, the systematic lies of our government during COVID, I see very much the same playbook here. It's very much the, manufactured crisis, manufactured response or attempted manufactured response, and then they provide the so-called solution. So what we're seeing right now is that these problems are manufactured through the geoengineering. Now there are real climate issues, obviously, but I think that when we're talking about the spraying and some of the extreme weather events and the weaponization of weather, we see this worldwide. We see all these 1 in 1,000 year flood events. Now, if we've gone through 1,000 years in about 6 weeks at that rate. And then they say, well, that's because you drive an SUV. Well, no, it's in large part because you're doing all this stuff over our heads. And then the solution is going to be to, completely limit your ability to function in a normal society. So we're seeing this already in Nova Scotia and in the Maritimes, where they're telling people that they can't go for a walk in the woods because of the fire risk. And so I see this as a classic sort of, what some people call a Hegelian dialectic. It's a, problem, reaction, solution kind of pattern. And they did it during COVID. They've tried to do it with the pandemic preparedness racket for decades. And now they're also doing it with climate.
I'm Julie Curran-Meskel.
And you are?
Stephanie.
Okay, so there's two kind of different stories, so it's hard to title this one. But we're going to start with the DTP story. So that's you, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, tell us what happened.
So my son was born in August of 1989, and he was born a happy, healthy baby. We had planned him, we looked forward to him. I just was devoted to everything surrounding his birth. And so he had a perfect APGAR score when he was born. Soon after that, I think it was at 2 months, he had his first DTP shot, and he had horrible reactions. He was screaming, high-pitched screaming that night. And so I called the doctor, and I felt like it was an emergency. Finally got hold of the doctor, and they said, oh, he's fine, he'll be fine. Just give him baby Tylenol. And he was never fine. And then somehow they convinced me to do another shot a couple months later. And pretty much the same thing occurred. He was very sick. And I have a baby calendar for his first year. I was at home, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I wrote down everything we did. I made a little note every day of his first year, what we did. And when he had his shots, there was even a nice little sticker that says, first shot. And after that, I wrote how he was ill, the first week after his shot. I think one was in March and one was October. But so he started biting a lot before he was 2. His brother was born 20 months later, and he was biting his baby brother. He was biting other children. I think it was probably the poisons in his brain from the vaccines. And he was just very impulsive and biting, and
so what did
yeah, and then he was biting until throughout preschool, kindergarten, until about age 7, and he even had an incident at age 9. He hadn't bitten for a while, and then he was trying to communicate something with a little girl. We were playing in a play group, and she didn't understand, and he couldn't communicate like he wanted to, and he bit her, and that was kind of surprising. But when he was 2 years old, we brought him to a psychologist because of his behavior. And remember the psychiatrist was telling me, well, he's a 2-year-old. Little boys have something called testosterone. And as if I didn't know that, right? And I had his baby brother in an infancy. I think he was only 2 months old. And my son Brendan, he was playing with the mini blinds in the guy's office, and he just kind of messing up his desk. And he said, no, that's fine. I've got a little girl. She's 3 and she's active too. That's just normal. And then my son picked up a timer. He had an egg timer on his desk, and he threw it at his baby brother and missed him by like a quarter of an inch. And then he gave me a referral to another professional psychiatrist, I believe. And then I was given a prescription for Ritalin at that time. He was only 2 years old. I didn't feel it, and I kind of looked around, and I found out that it was pretty rare for a 2-year-old to be on Ritalin.
It's really sad.
Yeah. So, and I didn't know, I was just used to just listening to doctors and taking their advice, but something told me, no, I don't think he should go on Ritalin at age 2. So he didn't. But when he was in preschool, the teachers pressured me so much to put him on Ritalin. At first I said no, but by the end of the year, they said, well, listen, you can always change your mind. You can always try giving it to him, and if it doesn't work, you could stop.
How old is he at this point?
So probably 4.5 or 5.
So 4.5, 5. You were being pressured to put him on Ritalin.
Yeah, and we did, and I did, and I've always been into natural things, but I did. So I put him on Ritalin, but it didn't work at first until they put him on a higher dosage, and it finally calmed down his behavior. But he was like a zombie, and he would say, "Mommy, I can't walk next door." And it completely changed his personality. He was this happy, jovial little boy that suddenly he had a major personality change and didn't want to do anything. He was lethargic. So yeah, that was probably 9 months in. We stopped taking the Ritalin.
Okay, and how is he today?
Today, he is schizophrenic. He has schizoaffective disorder. Yes, so we went to a psychologist when he was about 9 years old. I think he was he was at 2. They gave him the diagnosis for ADHD.
But then they gave
But
him
then
hormone
again,
medication.
and then I think it was
Were you still vaccinating him?
no.
So you stopped after
I
the
stopped.
GP.
I stopped
had
after
no
maybe
more.
the second one or so.
And he has not had any more today?
Well,
Is
he
in
has.
living?
Yeah, he's 34 years old. He was in, I think, jail where they forced the Pfizer vaccine on him 2 years ago. He's had many hospitalizations.
Why is he in jail? Because of his disorder?
Yes, he's had psychotic episodes. So he became bipolar probably when he was 18 years old. And a child psychologist said that he may be a bipolar child, but they really can't diagnose children with bipolar. So when he was older, when he was 18, 19, he was not graduating from high school. He didn't want to go to school, even though he scored very well cognitively, and he won the academic decathlon for the entire Orange County in the 8th grade, but he just, I don't know what, but he was having problems with depression, anxiety, and given an anti-anxiety medication. He had migraine headaches, which you had migraines too from, I think, right, from a vaccine.
So where is he now today? Is he in jail or?
No, he's in an apartment, supportive housing, but he's being evicted. Yeah, he's had delusions, hallucinations. So this has
But
been.
he's still on medication.
He's been on and off of medication for the last couple months. He has not, but so his pattern last few years is he goes into the hospital on maybe a 3-day hold that turns into a 14-day hold. He's on medication, and then he's out, and maybe a week later, after he's stabilized, he doesn't take the medication. And I don't even know if it works, to tell you the truth, or not. Sometimes it might help. I don't know that he's any worse off this last couple months that he hasn't been taking medication.
And what about his brother? Did his brother take any vaccinations?
He,
And when he was a baby, when he was a child, did you give him any?
unless they gave him one maybe as a baby, the first day or two, but I did not give him.
And how is he doing?
He's phenomenally well.
Does he have any schizophrenia? Or?
No, he's completely happy. He has a great career. He's a senior software engineer, lives in San Diego. He bought a condo. He has a girlfriend and a dog, and he's into all kinds of sports. He travels a lot, and he couldn't be happier. Yes, he's very well balanced and happy.
That's really sad, though, isn't it?
It's sad, and I think it's sad. I think my older son sees that his younger brother has all the things that he would like to have. Right.
Is there anything else you want to say about this story? Because it's a powerful story of drugs and vaccinations versus no drugs, no vaccinations.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Julie and I, we're neighbors, and
Right.
so I knew of the story about her son and the illness and everything, but we never really talked about vaccinations. Not until the mRNA, that whole thing. And because I worked in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry for 33 years, lost my job because I wouldn't take the jab. We started to share notes, and it's, you start to think, because I know a lot of my colleagues or friends from college, when they got married and had kids, their sons, several of them had autism. And I started to read the studies about the MMR vaccine associated with, autism in black boys. And I just thought, this is just ridiculous. And we just started sharing information, and here we are today. She says, let's go to the bus to tell the story, because a lot of people need to hear these stories.
So what did you do for the pharmaceutical companies? What kind of?
A lot. I worked headquarters, I worked in field sales training, a lot from selling the medications to showing people how to get reimbursed for the medications. And I was even selling in the HIV/AIDS arena, and I was a community relations person, would go to community organizations. That's how I was more familiar with Tony Fauci and all of that arena. I worked for the companies. I know of Gilead, Roche, Merck, all of the companies that are involved in this whole thing, like right now.
Pfizer.
And I just said, this is kind of crazy. You have a pandemic, and it seemed like it was more global. Everyone was doing the same thing. That has never happened before in my career. Even with 5N/H1, the last pandemic where Gilead had Tamiflu, which was sold by a company that I work for. And I said, something's not right. And I started to do investigation. And when Bobby Kennedy, the book came out, and then that's when I said, okay, now I see what's happening. And I knew about AZT and all of the people that had died because I worked in the industry. So I knew that this was, I don't know, it wasn't really the right thing for me to do. And
So did you question vaccinations because you worked with Big Pharma?
I did, and I know how we promote, how the drugs are promoted, how physicians are paid, reimbursement. It's a big machine. I probably will never get another job in pharmaceuticals now, but
You don't want to be working for the dark side.
no,
you come over to our side and work for us.
That's right.
But yeah, and so when I resisted of getting the inoculation because it's not a vaccine, and I worked in infectious diseases, so I said, okay, if I had Delta, why do I need to be vaccinated? It didn't make sense, and I've sold drugs that were mRNA, but it was always for, say, for example, a child that didn't have a specific gene, and this was a tool to replace the gene so then they would not have the effects from the disease. But I could not understand why would you inoculate someone with an mRNA drug? It's gene therapy, and it says it in their package insert, in a healthy person. It just didn't make sense.
So why do you think they did it? What's going on? What in your mind? What would you say is going on here?
It's all about the money. It's control. I think that it is a bioweapon, because I've been following this. I've worked in HIV and AIDS, and it's just a shame. And I think that when I joined 33 years ago in the pharmaceutical industry, we helped people. We saved a lot of people. But I think that now it's going in a dark space, and I just did not feel comfortable with it. And on our neighborhood, we live on a cul-de-sac with just 9 homes. 4 people have died.
From taking the shot.
Just
Yes,
recently.
just recently. And then down the street, we have 2 people, lung cancer, no history, never smoked. So you just start to look at the, strokes, Parkinson's disease, all of these different illnesses. And it's just,
There's one neighbor. He was only in his 20s. I didn't know him, but he died after getting the booster shot just a month ago.
absolutely. So this is, I just can't understand why people can't see it, but it's going on, and everyone is saying that, they had a genetic history, or, and it's crap. It's because of the shots. I do believe that's, in my opinion, it is. So it's sad.
So what did they say to you when they fired you? And which company were you working for then?
I'm not going to say which company
Come
I was
on.
working for.
Come on.
But they told me that if I didn't get the shot, they were going to place me on unpaid leave. So they placed me on unpaid leave, and this was not the hill I was going to die on, and literally.
Right.
And so then they said, okay, you're fired. So they fired me, and I was, high ranked in my region, doing extremely well. All of my customers, because I didn't sell any of, drugs. I sold drugs that were helping patients that were sick, so with like bone disease. So, but yeah, so they fired me, and now a lot of people are starting to reach out to me and said, "Guy, I regret. I had 2 colleagues to die. I'm going to a funeral next week of a 44-year-old that had 4 kids, and she had gotten her booster. This was with a medical device company that I was working, for a short period of time. And it's just sad to see a lot of young people that are dying. I've never seen anything like this before. Never.
Did you know about the sort of turbo cancer and all that kind of stuff while you were working in?
I'm a cancer survivor.
Right.
So I know, and both my parents died of lung cancer, but they were smokers. The neighbor down the street, my neighbor down the street, her husband died 8 weeks, lung cancer. But then she told me, she says, the doctor said that his lungs were full of clots. And I said, were they white fibrous clots? So this is in everyone is just now they're starting to say what's going on. And the healthcare professionals, they're not saying a word. Let's do tests, let's do this, let's do that. And it's just down a rabbit hole. They're not being honest.
We're getting a lot of reports of shedding. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. I cannot have someone that's vaccinated or booster in my car within close proximity.
We were
I get
talking
migraines.
about that on the way up. Yeah,
Mhm.
I wasn't sure that it was a real thing, but she's convinced it
real.
is.
It's real.
It's real.
So, and that was another reason when I had to kind of distance myself. But yeah, it's real. And when you read about the studies where vaccinated moms are shedding, they're finding mRNA in infants, that's a problem. And we were talking about the Ebola live attenuated vaccine that Colorado Health was vaccinating employees, and there's a 31% instance of shedding. That's a problem.
It's a problem.
So I'll get off my soapbox.
Is there
now.
anyone else, anything else either of you want to say to the people?
It occurred to me that my friend who would like to be here today, she couldn't, but her husband died a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, after breaking his leg. He was kind of remodeling a house. He broke his leg, went to the hospital. They said he had COVID, and a week later he was on remdesivir, which is universally, it's accepted that this is a poisonous
It's called Run Death, isn't it?
Run death is
Run
here.
death is
Yep.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, so he died because of that. Yeah. So
Yeah, and that's another thing. The 44-year-old person that died, I'm going to her funeral on Wednesday. She was diagnosed with COVID, and she went to the hospital. They admitted her, and her husband left her, pretty much, trusted in the healthcare professionals to take care of her, and she died. And it's, and I didn't want to ask questions, but the protocol is still going on. It's still happening. And, it's very sad. So I think that people just need to prepare, with a lot of medications to prevent from getting too sick. So, Delta, after the third day, that's when, you would really go south. And I had to go on a course, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, quercetin, vitamin C, vitamin D, and everything, and then I was fine. But this is a crisis, and all of the deaths that are happening, unexpected deaths, the state of California, the healthcare professionals need to look at that now, and no one's doing anything in California.
Well,
Or
thank you
anyone.
both. Thank you both for your story. Sorry about your son, it's tragic.
thank you.
And for you being brave and sitting there and doing that. That's what it's about. Told the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.